Well, Nigel, it's always good to see you in person, and we know you made the trip to Bradford City last night. So, start us off, what did you make of the game?
Well, firstly, it's nice to be back in the UK. I was supposed to be here at Christmas and chose in the end not to come. I think that was a good decision given all the postponed games that we've been talked about. So, I had a really enjoyable day at Bradford. Interesting stadium. And I thought we played a lot better than we have played. We're still not quite at the level that Kenny wants or that we want, but that was a vast improvement on the last few performances. So the players were incredibly frustrated not to have got the win, and they should have probably have held on. But at least this is better than what we've seen recently.
Well, we've had a lot of questions come in today. For yourself, so what we tried to put them in some categories so we can kind of have a bit of a structured discussion. I know that a lot of people have covered a lot of the same areas, so if your exact question doesn't come up, it's because we think it's probably covered in some way or another. But we have read all the questions and we're trying to cover as much of it as we can. So just to start us off, Nigel, there was an interview with BBC London where you said that the club would be aggressive in this transfer window, and that's a quote a lot of fans have used in their questions of you. So, again, one asked by the likes of Simon, Stephen, James, Johnny, just to name a few. Nigel said we were going to be aggressive in this transfer market. What did he mean by that? Other clubs like Mansfield seem to have been much more aggressive than us.
Well, it's interesting. There's a paper in the sports world called The Athletic, and they actually called out Mansfield and a couple of other clubs in the Premier League and Championship. So, it depends what you do mean by aggressive. What I meant is that we were going to go out and look for talent, and then identify the talent. And if I go right back to the start of the window, we started with players in 3 positions, and they were all rank ordered. And we turned out with 2 of the 3 players that we identified in those different categories. So we were aggressive. We then faced a situation whereby we had 3 players that were effectively out for the season. We knew, obviously, at the start of the window that Tom James was out. About the start of the window, Craig Clay went out. So we knew we then had to replace them. So that was extra on top of what we'd already identified. And then right at the end of the window, we had Paul Smith with his collapsed lung. He's had such an unfortunate season. But we had to find a way of replacing him as well. So what I meant by aggressive at the time was the board decided halfway through the window to add 150,000 to the budget to help Kenny get the players he wanted. So let me just explain the process. We meet every month, but people work on this every day, identifying targets. We get to the window. We then meet every week, the so-called transfer committee. And at the end of the window, things really heat up because you get a lot of players who have got their fingers in the pie of so many clubs, they start committing. So it gets much busier towards the end. So what I meant by aggressive is we'd identify players that we thought were going to be excellent for the future and would also help us this year. So that was people like Coleman, Khan and Brown. We bought them in. And at the end, we found we had this new problem, which was Smith. So that's why on transfer deadline day, we bought in Frank Nubli, if that's how you pronounce his name. And we also bought in George Ray from Exeter. We bought him in because we also discovered that Alex had an operation coming up, nothing to do with football, and we'd lose him for a time. So it's really covering all the bases so that we had a full squad for the rest of the season. And I think you can look back and say, were we aggressive? I think we were, because we gave more funds to Kenny than we originally planned.
So on to the next question is one from Paul, and he's asked, is Nigel concerned that Kenny Jackett stated after the Mansfield game that we need more experience, despite 3 of the 4 signings made before that game having no experience? To people outside the club, this seems very contradictory and suggests that the signings weren't anything to do with Kenny and instead were made for him.
Yeah, I've read that. And nothing could be further from the truth. So I'm going to now take us inside a transfer committee meeting. So we have a recruitment team that is basically people who look at all the statistics, which every club does now, And I actually recently compared with some other clubs, and I think what we have is top notch. You can always get better, but top notch. We use a couple of different providers. I won't say who they're called. And then we also have a lot of people scouting. And they're out looking at players all the time. People like Kenny and Martin are also out looking all the time. So we have all that information, and we go to the meeting. So Kenny identifies what positions he wants. Now, clearly, as I've already explained, that changes with injuries and circumstances. And people think the process is straightforward. I can tell you, I talked to someone else in another club. They didn't get one of their targets, and it got confused as well because they had a number of injuries as well. That was someone I spoke to today. We got some of our top targets, but they're always the targets that Kenny approves. So this mystical, we dump people onto Kenny, I can say categorically is complete nonsense. He is in the meetings. He has probably the biggest say of anyone, but there always is a back and fro about the different players, the advantages, the benefits. And some people are saying that the people we brought in, particularly Coleman and Brown, are relatively inexperienced, yes, but they are ones that we think are going to benefit this club for a long time. And having seen the team play live last night, I was particularly impressed with Ethan Coleman. He's got some real leadership qualities. But obviously, we did identify that we needed some more experience as we've lost 3 players recently. And that's why we went out and got experience on transfer deadline day and brought people in on a short-term basis.
Yeah, let's stick with the transfer committee briefly. We'll go back into the transfer windows a bit specifically in a minute. But a question we had was about why actually we need a transfer committee in League Two. It's unnecessary and stops the manager getting the signings he wants, as seen by the abysmal January window we've had. And then just to follow that up, Liam said, can you explain the thought process behind a transfer committee instead of allowing the managers to bring his own players? So I think there's a bit of, frustration there that it seems from the outside that Kenny doesn't get that kind of full control. I think the question we'll lead with there is why does the transfer committee, is it needed in League Two?
Okay, well, I think in many ways I've already answered that because Kenny felt he needed some more talent. We went out, put extra money in, and the reason we have a transfer committee is in any process you need to have a check and balance. You don't just let people go out and make decisions. You always try and look at every side of a question. We have all the same debates about whether we put the East Stand roof on, whether we're going to have a new ticketing system that I think we all agree we need. So it's no different from what we do in any other part of the Leyton Orient business. But one of the benefits of being involved in the way that we do, it means that we know exactly what Kenny wants. And effectively, I can say that Kenny got every player that he identified that he wanted to bring in.
And I think just, to go a bit deeper on that one as well, there's a question here, I didn't write the name down, but wanting to know, with the transfer committee, who exactly sits on it, and also who gets the very final say on deals? Okay.
Well, firstly, I've always believed that decisions evolve. You don't have to have one person who makes a decision. I mean, we always have, and I'll go through who's on it in a moment, and I've done that before. We always sit down, have a discussion, and we've always come out, as far as I can recall, with unanimity on the actions for who we're going to go after. And I think what people need to know is it changes every day. Some players get signed by other clubs. Some players find that they've been attracted by all kinds of clubs. Suddenly clubs make players available at the last minute because they brought someone in. Sometimes they wait until the last minute to tell a player that they're not needed, and then suddenly a player is available that you don't know about. Every club goes through this, and I was talking to Bradford about it last night as well. So this is not unique to Leyton Orient. So we need to have a process where we can react. It's chaired by Matt Porter, who's got a lot of experience in football. There's Kent Teague, myself, Martin Ling, obviously, and then as the scouts come in, not for all meetings, but for some meetings, and recruitment analyst Michael Steele, he does most of the heavy lifting because he works with Kenny and the team throughout the year on identifying players, getting all the data on them. They watch hours and hours of film. They bring the reports together with all the scouting reports. It's quite a sophisticated process. And I think one thing I would say, there is probably an analogy with finding a house. If you suddenly decide you want to buy a house in Chigwell, you go out, you get all the details on all the houses available, then you go through the pros and cons, and you'll look at how much the rates are and energy bills or whatever. It's a very similar process, and then we have a very good discussion looking at the pros and cons. But Kenny drives it because it's the people to fit his style, his approach, and that's how it works. And I'd say it works very effectively.
Coming back into, the transfer window, there was we saw a departure in Dan Kemp, moving on to MK Dons. And another question we had was, why was Dan Kemp sold for a fee that wasn't reinvested back into the squad, and why have we not disclosed that fee?
Okay, there's a lot of deals that aren't disclosed, and sometimes we do it for reasons the other club doesn't want it disclosed, sometimes us, and we did reinvest it for reasons I said earlier. We actually had 150,000, and fees these days aren't as straightforward as they used to be. I remember back in 1962, Gordon Bolland being signed in the year when we went up. He came in at 19,000. I remember that as a fan. But these days, sometimes you get fees where you get fees depending on number of appearances. You get a fee depending on if you get promotion, you get a fee. Obviously, if there's a sell-on, so you get a certain percentage. So undisclosed usually means it's a mix of the above.
Thank you very much. Another question we had from Lewis Tweed. He said, will we see any creative midfielders coming in on a free transfer? And if not, why have we mainly focused on defensive-minded players?
Okay, so again, we don't decide who we want. Kenny looks at the mix of players he wants, the skill set he wants. Dan Kemp, effectively, it was a mutual decision between him and Kenny that he should go because he wasn't getting the pitch time he expected. And I think it's fair to say that even though a lot of people like Dan, he hasn't performed to the level that perhaps we saw previously. So it was a mutual decision he should move in. Milton Keynes were interested, and Kenny will continue outside the window to look for creative midfield players and perhaps other players. What most people don't realise is if someone is paid up and available at the end of the transfer window, you can sign them because they're a free agent. So if a player is playing for X club and even played last Saturday and then they get paid off, they now become a free agent that we can sign. So we will continue to look at players. We look at players all the time, and who knows, we may bring someone in.
So a question from Alan. He'd asked, has there been a shift in transfer policy from targeting what we said before, were League One ready players with experience into more younger players with potential but limited experience?
No, I think we look at them all. I mean, we want everyone to be able to play in League One, and I can tell you, we believe, and I've had the conversation as recently as last night with Kenny, that Brown and Coleman are two examples of players that we think can play in League One. We think we've got some excellent talent in both players.
Obviously, the transfer window now done. Question from Lee said, are we now looking at next season, or do you genuinely believe we can make the playoffs?
Okay, so first thing I'll say before anyone writes it or says it, I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist. I'm a Leyton Orient fan, and we bought Kenny in because we believe Kenny has had continued success. I believe he still can have success this year. No one is more frustrated with the fact we're 15th than Kenny. I had a meeting with him today. He said how frustrated he was 3 times about it. So you've heard it from him. I've heard it from him. We know he's frustrated. We'll do everything we can this year. Clearly, it doesn't look like the same task as we had a month ago. But unfortunately, we had all the postponements and then the run of bad form. But I think we should just stay positive, keep hoping we can make the playoffs. And we genuinely believe, and I know Kenny does, we've got the squad to make a difference. But he said to the squad, and he said to everyone, I think, on his interviews, that we can do better, and I'm pretty sure we will.
Just to follow that up again, Neil's asked about whether or not your expectations for the season have now changed given the poor form, and at what stage does planning begin for next season and entering into contract negotiations with Kenny and his staff?
Okay, so I think I clearly say we're very happy with Kenny, and we talk about his staff, we talk about players the whole time. So it just doesn't get turned on and off. It's a continual process. And Kenny's the first to say, you know, how can he improve? How can his staff improve? How can his players improve? So we have discussions non-stop. And I know a lot of people write about the role of Martin Ling. Martin's role is more than the first team, as I've said many times. And I don't think we give enough credit this year to the development we've seen in the academy. We're very excited about what the academy are doing. And one thing I didn't expect this year, we've actually found 2 players who are going to be given pro terms through the college program. So our all-embracing strategy of focusing on the academy, of focusing on the college programs, developing young players, I think is beginning to work very effectively. And you'll see some of those players coming through in the next year or so. I personally think one area we can do better, and I've said this internally, is loans. I think Millwall, a good example, we've got 2 of their players on loan right now. I think we can actually manage our loans more effectively, give players different experience, and a great example of how it works is Shadrach clearly went to Dover and Aldershot, got some really good experience there, and has been a star performer. And we shouldn't forget, in the window, we also signed Shadrach to a longer contract, and I think that was a real win.
Just sticking with Martin there was a couple of questions in pointing towards Bolton last year, where they moved away from a director of football and then saw success. But obviously from your answer there, it seems that director of football is still kind of the long-term strategy for you in the club.
Oh, very, very much so. We think that the director of football enables us to do a lot of things. I mean, one of the things that hasn't happened for 2 years now is our overseas camps, which are designed not necessarily to find players, because Brexit is a major barrier to bringing people in from overseas, be they European or not, but it's a way of building our fan base internationally. So we are going to have probably 4 camps in the States this year, and we're also looking at camps elsewhere. The college program's a major success. Martin's also responsible for women's football, and they've had a good season. And based on some discussions today, I think there's a good chance that we're going to apply for promotion to a new level at the end of the season. So I just want to remind everyone, it's not all about finding players for the first team. He has a much broader remit, and when you've got a manager as experienced, clear thinking, and by the way, and works as hard as Kenny, I'm very confident that Martin doesn't need to give him all the help that he might give a less experienced manager.
Moving on to some, I guess, slightly broader questions. We had a question from Dan, who asked, why don't we make more use of our link with Liverpool?
We don't really have a link with Liverpool. I know people there. Martin knows people there, like Alex Inglethorpe. It's not like a formal relationship we have. We have good relationships with a number of clubs, but there's not a really close link there. I mean, I talk to the people who run Fenway regularly, and they've always been incredibly helpful to us. And as people know, sometimes they've trained on our pitch here at the Braille Group Stadium, but it's not like a formal link where we have it all written down. Now, what I will say, we continue to talk to Premier League clubs about a more formal link, but nothing's so far been put into any form of formal contract.
A question from Dan, who's asked, what is the situation with the new CEO? Because our attendances seem to have dropped, and teams in the conference seem to be getting bigger gates than us. So what is the current CEO and potentially the new CEO plans to improve attendances? So I guess there's 2 parts to that question.
Okay. Well, firstly, the reason I'm here this week, besides seeing the club and meeting everyone, which is clearly important, is I'm doing CEO interviews. I think we're in a great situation. We had a lot of excellent candidates. They've been through a whole series of interviews. I've done one this afternoon. I've got more to do later this week. I'm hopeful that in the very near future we'll have a final candidate identified. The talent has been exceptionally good. I'm very optimistic about the outturn, and I think we'll have a CEO identified very quickly. In terms of attendances, we had actually a very good attendance for the Saturday game that was against I've forgotten who, but and then we had an appalling attendance for the Tuesday game. I think one of the things we're suffering from is still a number of people slightly nervous about COVID. Clearly, our poor form on the back of the drought of games wasn't very helpful. Our players became rusty, and then form impacted it. But I'm hoping everyone will come out to see the game against Colchester on Saturday. I think it's important that people do it. In terms of getting more fans in, we continue to engage like this interview with our fans. We continue to tell it the way it is, which I don't think all clubs do. I mean, I think we try and engage and tell our fans exactly what's going on all the time. And there's also a marketing campaign that's starting locally this week, backing up our tagline, Real Football in the Capital. So we want to encourage some more local people to come in. So I think it's been a really difficult period for the world. I think COVID has stopped a lot of initiatives in the last few weeks. We were on a good track coming up to Christmas. Sounds like our form, but I think the same reasons apply.
A couple of questions here that are kind of similar. I'll start with the first one from Billy. He said, is there any truth to the rumours of Waltham Forest Council putting aside land for Leyton Orient at the new Spitalfields Market for a possible stadium years down the line?
We've talked to Waltham Forest Council, as I think we said on one of the previous sessions, about, if ever we should want to move, we'd like to move in Waltham Forest. So whether they've identified some land that I don't know about, I think that sounds like an interesting option if it's true. I don't know if it's true.
On the back of that as well, someone's asked, would you consider renovating the derelict Hairn Hound Stadium on Lee Bridge Road so that the women and / youth team could play there?
Probably not, and I'll tell you why, because we're looking to build a training ground, and again, I think I've covered this before. The spec that we've come up with is basically 15 acres, ideally in an area that is commutable from where most players can reach, but also the academic players can go. I think the Hairn Hound Stadium, which I remember going to quite regularly back in the day, it will be a good place, but it's only one pitch. We need more than that. And I think we've also got an interesting issue with the women at the moment, which is I think if they start going up the levels, which I think they will, we're going to have to find another place for them to play. Had a discussion about that today. So we're throwing all that into the mix. I think the bottom line is everyone should feel good that we're making progress in a whole range of areas, be it the academy, the women's football, and I still believe we're going to have a better end of the season than it looks right now.
The question is, what happened with our link to Hertford Athletic after the announcements of a partnership with them? I've heard nothing else.
Okay, well, same reason again, COVID. I mean, it's very active. I talk to Bruce Mansdell, their owner, all the time. He's been to a game here. I know watches all the games. We're actively talking about can we send some players on loan this summer. They play in the USL Championship, which is just right below the MLS in the States. So that's very active. We talk about different ideas all the time. So the partnership is still very strong. And we're also talking about a summer camp.
Brilliant. Coming back to the kind of more long-term look at things, there was a question from Jack about, I'll read it from the beginning. So, hi Nigel, if Orient are to become sustainable as a club, I believe we need to identify our position in the market, which includes both opportunities and threats. I see disillusionment with the Premier League as an opportunity, but I also see the growth of non-league crowds locally, such as Walthamstow, as a threat. They are able to offer a much cheaper product and can attract people who wish to stand and drink pitchside, which we can't. Is there a situation where Orient get caught in the middle of these two things? And if so, what can we do about it?
Well, I would agree with him. What did you say his name was? Sorry. Jack. I agree with Jack that being caught in the middle is not a good position. So I think he raises some really good points. So let me take one of those. The Tracy Crouch report has talked about the League Two and the National League being given the opportunity to test drinking pitchside or in view of the pitch is the way I usually phrase it. I know some fans have got concerns about that, and I think on the last meeting we committed to consult about that if and when we're given the opportunity to do that trial. I think we try and price our products appropriately. We try and give people both the quality on the field, and I think we're very keen on finding ways to boost fan engagement and build up the atmosphere. I think Crystal Palace is a very good example. A number of board directors are working on that project. I'm pleased that non-league football seems to be coming on, because one of the downsides of Brexit is we're going to need more talent in this country, and it's very difficult for Premier League to sign anyone. Well, it's impossible for them to sign anyone under the age of 18 because of the Brexit rules. So there's going to be a real demand for players to be developed in England. We are constantly looking at non-league talent, so hopefully it's going to become more visible. One practical issue that most people don't understand is non-league football video doesn't really exist below the National League. In fact, some National League teams don't have video. So you need video to really get all the stats that clubs use. But I think the Tracy Crouch report is about pushing resources away from the Premier League down the pyramid. We support that. But I think he raises some good issues about pricing, drinking, fan engagement, and I think it's something we should take seriously. And certainly I'll mention it to the new CEO.
And yeah, I guess just to finish, again, a question we've had from a few people, and it's quite a direct question, but it's a simple one, is do the club actually want to get promoted?
Yes. And the reason I say yes 3 times is, firstly, I'm a fan. We're all fans because we've put money into the club. Is financial benefit to go up. We're frustrated that we're currently sitting 15th in the league. We're frustrated with recent form. We've still got 20 games to go. Absolutely no doubt we want to go up.